I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to The Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. Today is Wednesday, July 12th, 2023. And as always, I'm promising that we'll deliver a robust conversation, a good conversation. Pleased to have a friend and long-term associate and leader in community, Noel Nix. We'll talk about a lot of stuff, but start off talking about his recent being named a Bush Fellow, what that means for him in his career development. A distinguished career it has been, and I'm sure will continue to be. Before we get started, two things. One, I want to invite you to support this program. We're streaming live on YouTube at the YouTube Black Press USA channel. We're streaming live on the YouTube Insight News MN channel. We're also streaming live on Twitter and LinkedIn, on 3 Facebook platforms, Insight News, Al McFarlane Facebook, and on Black Press USA. We're trying to reach you, to connect with you in as many ways as we can, and we appreciate you connecting with us. First of all, let us know when you are tuned into the program. Just shout us out. Put a note in the comment section and say hi to somebody, hi to everybody. Make a comment on what we're talking about. Bring your voice, your vision to the conversation. But secondly, in the course of this hour or afterwards, go over to the YouTube channel, YouTube Insight News, and there click subscribe, share, and like. So that's what we want you to do. That helps us grow the program. I want to also acknowledge that we are pleased that we're working with our friends over at Minnesota Department of Health, and they're hosting a COVID vaccine event in St. Paul at the Amherst H. Wilder facility at 451 Lexington Parkway North, St. Paul 55104. That's going to be this Saturday, July 15th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. It's a free event. It's open to the public. And like us, the Department of Health is encouraging everyone to get vaccinated against COVID. Make sure you are protected. One way to do that is to show up. Of course, follow the protocols. Even though the pandemic is declared over, we learned a lot about being safe. Let's not forget that. Let's keep being safe. Well, today, we've got a couple of things to talk about in what I call hot topics. And the first is a story about, it's a little old, but it's interesting. It's a piece that was in Associated Press, and it talked about the city council making a decision that strangely was done while 3 members of the council who were Muslim were away to observe the Eid holiday. So this story really was June 29th in Associated Press. I think we ran it in Insight News. And it said that while 3 Muslim council members were away to observe, the Eid al-Adha holiday, the Minneapolis City Council nearly voted to kill a measure that would have put a rent control question on the ballot for this fall. The majority of the council supports a 3% annual residential rent cap. But with Aisha Chungtai, with Jeremiah Ellison, and Jamal Osman out on this particular Wednesday, the council voted not to move the measure forward. That, according to a Minnesota Public Radio report, Islamophobia, quote unquote, is what one member of the audience said during the meeting. And similar accusations raged on Twitter, while at the same time, rent control opponents expressed relief that the issue was off the table. This meeting was scheduled more than a year ago, theoretically to accommodate Eid, which at that time had been predicted to fall on a Thursday, but the date is subject to change depending on lunar observations. And according to City Clerk Casey Carroll, the first time anyone raised concern about Eid was on the prior Monday, and it was too late to change the date of the council meeting under state law. That, according to the Star Tribune, Carl apologized, but said that for years the city clerk's office has relied on council members to make it aware of religious and cultural conflicts. Well, it obviously didn't feel right to those council members. In the statement after the vote, Ellison, Osman, and Chung Tai criticized the vote as going against the spirit of inclusion that Minneapolis prides itself on, and said the council leadership should have scheduled the meeting at a later date, delayed the vote to the next council meeting, or advanced the policy for further changes. Well, interesting. The second hot topic, and if you got a comment on that, that's kind of a textbook of not backroom, but almost like backroom dealing. Somebody steps out to the water cooler, let's have a vote. And the people that were away, they lose because they weren't there when the vote went down. What do you think about that? Let me know. Send me a note in the comments. The other piece is about a Minneapolis woman who was charged after a 2022 racist tirade against a Black Uber driver, and that was captured on video. And she was initially charged with falsely reporting a crime to police. Charge was dropped without explanation. The story that was in the Star Tribune on July 11th, written by Paul Walsh, says a woman has been charged in connection with a racist tirade toward a Black Uber driver on Hennepin Avenue in South Minneapolis last year. The woman is Jill C. Berquist. She's 38 years old. She was initially charged in district court on June 22nd with 2 misdemeanors. One is falsely reporting a crime and disorderly conduct in connection with the tirade on April 1, 2022, that the driver video recorded and posted on YouTube. We actually have a copy of that, and we're going to show that to you. Yasmin, if you can go ahead and run that, that'd be cool.
Turn around, go home. This is wrong. I'm not wasting this 10 o'clock money. I'm calling Uber. Go back home now. I have to deal with this to me. I love the Halloween party.
I'm not gonna argue with you.
No man Halloween with some Uber driver and he took the back route to 100 North and then the long way into St. Louis Park to Uptown and Halloween. No, it doesn't make me feel. Go to Uptown, motherfucker. I'm calling. Go to Uptown.
Don't call me back.
Go to Uptown now. You're making me uncomfortable. I'll call the cops.
Call
Uptown.
them
Go to
right now.
Uptown. Stop
Call
it.
them.
No,
You
I
call
want this
them.
man to go to Uptown.
You call them.
Go to Uptown, dude.
You call
I'm
them. Let's see who's
Uptown.
gonna get off.
Current story. Classic Karen. What do you think? Let me know impressions, feelings. And I'm glad that the brother videotaped that and presented that. I think we have to always challenge language like that, attitudes, this arrogance that is really rampant in community. Well, again, love to have your thoughts, your feelings, your observations about that. Let me introduce my guest today. And my guest is Brother Noel Nix. And he's been in the public policy, public service arena for a long time. He is recently named a Bush Fellow, and we're here to talk about that background. Noel Nix, my notes say, knows from experience that good intentions and ideas are not enough to create lasting change, or that meaningful action is also necessary. He's worked as a St. Paul City Council aide, as a Ramsey County Commissioner Assistant, and now Director of Community Initiatives for St. Paul Mayor Melvin Carter, where he advances the idea of comprehensive approaches to community development. He sees that the work to create equitable community change within powerfully entrenched systems takes a tremendous toll on the mental health of people in public service especially people of color. So he says that the push for changing these systems so that they work better for everyone is linked to the mental health of those leading the work. He wants to equip himself with both knowledge and skill to integrate mental health practice into the public sector environment. He's going to be pursuing some advanced education through which he'll build a network of mental health care practitioners who can support transformational leaders. And he wants to study successful community-based mental health care models. Brother Noel, good to see you. How you doing, man?
Doing well. Thanks for having me out.
Well, welcome, welcome, welcome. And, a conversation long overdue, but always right on time at the same time. So talk about how you feel about getting the Bush Fellow appointment.
Well, I'm just really excited and humbled. Bush Fellows are some of the folks in our community who are doing some of the most innovative, impactful work that is happening in Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota. And so to have my interest in the intersection of mental health and public and community service to be counted among the incredible bodies of work that my fellow fellows, as well as past fellows, have received fellowships for, is just, again, really exciting and humbling.
How does the fellowship work? You're awarded a cash stipend for a period of time to help you not have to work every day, but to spend on your project or initiative. Is that how? Tell me how it works.
Yeah, so the way that the Bush Foundation describes it is it's really an investment in the fellows' leadership. Mm-hmm. And as applicants, we're asked to articulate where we're at in our leadership journey, where we want to go in our leadership journey, the impact that we feel that we've had through our leadership, and the impact that we hope to have. And so it's a $100,000 grant, really just to invest as the fellow sees fit into growing in their leadership capacity around the area that they've identified. So there's not a whole lot of restrictions on how that takes place. That can be for education, that can be for travel, that can be for a lot of different things.
Covers a 1-year period, 2-year period. What's the time frame?
So it can be 1 to 2 years, and I've opted for 2 years for 24 months. That'll start in August.
Okay. Well, congratulations, man. And so do you keep your job while you do that, or do you step away from your regular income system?
So that's part of the beauty of the fellowship is that income replacement, if you do need to step away from work as part of the fellowship, is an eligible expense. As for me, there is just too much amazing stuff happening in the city of St. Paul with Mayor Melvin Carter for me to want to step away right now. But it's good to know that I have the flexibility and the opportunity to potentially step away to explore some different things over this next 24 months.
Well, and plus, I guess it gives you time to devote all of your other time, on the critical thinking and networking and bridge building and research and analysis that you're embarking on. I think it does that anyway.
Exactly. I mean, so the work that I'm excited about and focused on, even though it's really centered on mental health and really diving deep into mental health, I see it as just inextricably connected to the work that I'm doing every day in the city of St. Paul in terms of finding ways to partner with community to strengthen community and to build the type of city and the type of neighborhoods that we all want to live in and where we all feel like we have an opportunity to succeed.
Let's talk about your career. You've got a great career, public service. I mentioned city council aide, county commissioner, assistant, and now in the mayor's office. Where did you start? How did you get involved in the beginning in the public sector work that you've specialized in, actually?
An important backdrop is that I'm not originally from here. I grew up in Flint, Michigan. So during the 80s and the 90s, in a family that was really dedicated to public service. So my dad was a community outreach and community organizer director with the local Catholic Church. And my mom was a local labor attorney who went on to become a district court judge. So really, like, my career in public service started in answering the phone in my mom's office and doing anti-drug marches, with my dad, during the 80s and 90s. And so then moved here and really brought with me my just sort of fascination and interest in understanding what makes cities and communities work and what makes them not work. So folks who know history know that, Flint in the 80s and 90s went through a lot of transition from being an extremely prosperous community and sort of the center of the blue collar economy in the United States to being gutted and with a lot of the jobs leaving for overseas. So I brought that interest with me to Minnesota and eventually studied urban planning at the University of Minnesota. Got my master's there at the Humphrey School. And it wasn't too long before I was able to cross paths with Melvin Carter, who at the time was a city council member with the city of St. Paul and was doing some incredible work. He was looking for a new aide at the time. And it was actually a mentor of mine who encouraged me to kind of throw my name out there and apply. Through the Ward 1 office, was able to do some incredible work with the Councilmember Carter around the St. Paul Promise neighborhood. So thinking about how we can replicate models like the Harlem Children's Zone locally to comprehensively support young people in our community and their educational outcomes. Also, I got to work with a lot of incredible community partners during light rail construction, during the construction of the Green Line, to think about what the economic development strategy should look like. So really, my role was just to think about what's the role of the city in working with incredible leaders on the ground who are working with business owners to build our local economy and to build prosperity. So from there, I got to work with Commissioner Tony Carter in her office. And she, of course, led a lot of incredible work around juvenile detention alternatives.
That was like moving upstairs or downstairs?
That would have been downstairs.
Downstairs, right? Okay. Yeah.
The next level up a government, move one floor down.
There we go. Okay.
And so got to do some great work around JDAI. And also one of the projects that I'm just really passionate about and really proud of is around what's called the Dale Street Bridge. So if folks are on I-94 headed east or west or crossing Dale over I-94, they'll notice that, that bridge has a lot of incredible public art that points to and honors and lifts up the legacy of Rondo. So that was a project where Marvin Anderson and Seitu Jones, two incredible community leaders, came to Commissioner Carter and said, we heard y'all are redoing that bridge, that the county's redoing that bridge, and we need to do something special for the community. So I was able to work with community members to design, and our leaders within the county to sort of design a process where community artists got to participate in the design of that bridge.
That's amazing. That's wonderful. I'm going to ask you to talk about, to recall the Flint story, because you watched, as you described, it evolve or devolve from a prosperous American blue-collar community into a wasteland or a ghost town, in so many words, because of the flight of jobs and the resulting rise of disadvantage for our people in particular. So I'm going to go through that before we get done. But I'm fascinated by the narrative that you're sharing right now about your civic and working in the city council and the county commissioner's office. I had Noel, I had talked to a brother one time who was part of Obama's transition team. And I think we had invited him to come and talk to the Black Press of America at our annual convention. And I just remember him getting up and telling us, and it was like 300, 200 publishers, owners of newspapers, Black papers there. But this was almost like a private, confidential, intimate moment with him speaking, he said that when we got to the White House and started putting our people in all of these departments, and he particularly mentioned Department of Commerce, we had no idea of how much money and how much power was being moved through these channels. It blew us away. And so I was glad to hear that, because we have not been privy to the process of handling the levers of power. And I raised the question, I raised the story, because I'm wondering how you felt moving out of the university, wanting to move into government, landing a relationship with then Council Member Carter, and taking on real money issues. How does it feel to not be where most of us are, well, sometimes beneficiaries, sometimes victims, but we mostly where we can complain about what didn't happen, and most of the time feel powerless to make things happen because we think ourselves as isolated individuals. But then you move from that status into the seat of power and become one of the people holding the reins of power. How did that feel? And am I over describing something? Does that?
No, I think that, well, I can see where from the outside it looks that there's more nuance to it, right?
Okay,
So
yeah.
I think that, yes, it's an incredible transition to go from studying policy decisions and understanding how those policy decisions have either moved us forward or moved us backward, either by design or unintentionally, to being a close advisor to someone who is charged with advocating for policy and voting on policy, right? To move dollars and to move policies that will create change within our community. At the same time, it's working within a system, and systems are made up of people, and people have different interests and different ways of doing things. And so, yes, there are massive resources that our governments, our public entities are tasked with deploying. And it is always a process and a negotiation to try to move the dial or to try to move dollars in terms of having the impact that one wants to have. Whether it's working with staff within a department who are experts and have perspectives and opinions, and sometimes push back and sometimes push forward, or it's negotiating with other elected officials who have different interests and different ideas. Every single day, it's a conversation and it's a negotiation. I remember mentioning at one point to one of the other council aides when I was working in the Ward 1 office in St. Paul, it occurs to me that we're not in the idea business, we're in the relationship business when it comes to public policy, because there's nothing that you can, or very few things, I will say, that you can just do alone without working with staff, other electeds, community members to try to go in a specific direction. So yes, it's daunting and incredible, the amount of power and influence that one has the opportunity to use. But it's also daunting in terms of the process in which to try to move things within that arena.
Are there stories of so I'm curious about your discovery? You're coming up against situations where interest revealed themselves, and the interests that reveal themselves are what's the right word? Not the interest of your constituents or of an idea that you think whose time has come. Have you run across that at all, or where people been doing something the same way for a long time, and they've got a flow, a groove, usually a flow of money, that manages and that has that creates loyalties. I'm kind of fishing around here.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, yeah.
I think that the biggest thing that we encounter in Mayor Carter's office, right, I think, is bumping up against the notion hey, the city government only does certain things, right? So there's a fixed line of businesses, so to speak, that we're supposed to be in as city government. And Mayor Carter, has really cast this vision that no, we're here to build a city that works for all of us, and we're going to do everything within our power to make that happen. And so sometimes it's just the process of saying, how do we retool within our city departments, within our community relationships, to do things in new and different ways that might not follow the old script in terms of what our notions of what a city government does or doesn't do. I experienced that at the county as well, and I'll go back to the Dale Street Bridge project. And so when community leaders came to us and said, hey, we should do something special with this infrastructure project, since it's in the Rondo community. The first thing that we Commissioner Carter and I were told, it's like, well, we don't have a public art law within the county, so we're not sure where the money's going to come from. And so then it was like, well, are there ways, let's look at ways that we can build things within the already laid out project budget that that will allow us to do some design pieces, right? Surely we can mold concrete in some different ways, or do some different things with the sidewalk. So let's think of this as a canvas and think about the low cost ways to work on the canvas. Well, then it was, we don't have the dollars to hire community artists. And so, our deputy county manager at the time and our public works director, agreed to just go out and try to raise some of the dollars from our philanthropic community, so that we would be actually able to pay commissioned artists to work on that project. So, we bump up against these notions of like, well, here's the way that we've always done things. And again, it's always sort of a conversation and negotiation to say, maybe we can think about that differently.
Well, so any other examples of things that even surprised you that you were able to accomplish? Because I'm sure some of the challenges seemed, as you said, daunting and fixed and immovable, but with persistence and with tenacity, things change.
Yeah, I think sometimes, what's surprising are the things that are difficult that you don't think should be difficult. And then sometimes what's surprising are the things that you think are going to be difficult that aren't. One of those that I think was easy for all the stakeholders to get behind was a project that Mayor Carter had tasked me with around thinking about how do we get young people involved in the governance of our community in some different ways. So part of my role as the director of community initiatives within Mayor Carter's office is to run the board and commission appointment process. And we could have like a whole show on that, Al, just talking about the importance of seeking appointed leadership.
And I think we need to come back and do that, because I think it's critically important, because we simply have not been part of the equation to the degree that we should be. But
right, because we think there's, from the outside, you think there's one table, right? So Mayor Carter makes appointments to 39 different boards, about like 15 or so of those within the city of St. Paul, the others being community organizations, right? And the mayor really wanted to ensure that, we're not telling young people, hey, maybe one day you'll get to be an appointee to these, to say, you know what, like you need to be at the table now, right? Because we're building the city that you're going to have to live in much longer than any of us, like grown folks who, are a little bit further up the road than you. So we built this program with our St. Paul libraries and our St. Paul Parks and Rec department called Youth on Boards. And the whole idea is working through our Right Track youth job program to create these unique internships that include a placement, a mayoral appointment to one of the city's boards or commissions. So we've been able to have young people pull up a chair at the table for conversations around human rights, around how we're preserving the cultural heritage of our city and doing that in different ways, around how we're impacting policy for the elderly or the disabled, how we're investing in infrastructure. It's been really incredible, and it was easier than I thought it would be in some cases to have conversations about, well, what do you think about having a 16, 17, 18-year-old at the table for, to talk about how we're going to invest $11 million in bonding dollars in infrastructure. Oh, yeah. Great idea. Let's do it.
One of our viewers, Mike V. Hey, Mike, how you doing? Thank you for always being here. He puts a question up. One of the areas of concern is that in Black neighborhoods, social infrastructure equity is a concern. He mentions that in Boston, they spend $1 million on a basketball court when he said, in reality, we need something more innovative, like a STEM park where children can learn and play rather than empty tarmacs that lead to a low return on the investment. What's been your experience around that comment?
Yeah, I think that goes back to just sort of the ethos within Mayor Carter's administration that says, let's think differently about what the role of local government is. So if we're going to pour some concrete, how do we do that in a way that has a multiple bottom line where, we can enrich the minds, the bodies, right, the spirits of young people in different ways, right? So how do we think about our libraries and our rec centers as spaces that provide an opportunity to invest in our young people in different ways? I think that, we're continually trying to push the envelope in terms of that thinking. And again, that sometimes bumps up against notions of what the quote unquote traditional role of city government is. But what we know is that, there are just incredible needs and incredible opportunities within our community. And sometimes we can be a little bit more responsive at the local level than at the state level or at the federal level. We certainly have great partnerships there and are able to bring resources to bear. But yeah, I think that that's exactly right. That we need to be thinking differently about how we're investing in our young people through our public investments.
I'm Al McFarlane. You're listening to The Conversation with Al McFarlane. My guest is Noel Nix. He's a 2023 Bush Fellow, a project that awards thinkers, planners, doers, some room and some resources so they can think more deeply, have more impact in their chosen fields by study, by work, by travel, any variety of ways. Noel is a person with a history of civic engagement, civic service, civic leadership, works now for the mayor of St. Paul, Mayor Melvin Carter. Noel, interested in how at the city level you all are massaging the question about what is public safety. The world looked at George Floyd and Philando Castile in St. Paul, and incidents like that around the country became clearer that these were happening all the time, everywhere. They were not one of. And so the world is asking, in particular, our people in this country are asking, how do we envision another strategy for creating and maintaining public safety? What has St. Paul done? What have you done in your arena, developing programs for young people around that issue?
Yeah, so that's another thing where we could do a whole show. And we have an incredible team at the city of St. Paul who has been working in this arena. In my role, I was able to be a part of the team that helped design our new Office of Neighborhood Safety that's headed up by Brooke Blakey, that is really sort of the focal point of working with our other departments around thinking comprehensively about and holistically about public safety.
Mm-hmm.
The term that we use, that the mayor uses, is community first public safety. So the notion that our public safety strategies are going to put community at the center,
mm-hmm.
and that we're going to think comprehensively beyond emergency response. So emergency response is critical when something terrible and tragic happens within our community, but to really build a deeper sense of safety, it requires us to get upstream and think about how we work with community members, with families, with individuals who may be experiencing a mental health crisis, or just need a place to plug in and do something, whether it be a job or like a really fun after school activity, that's going to provide a good alternative to the other things that are out there. And we need to think sort of downstream from an emergency, right? So how do we break the cycles of trauma that are happening within our community that lead to recurring and tragic sort of cycles of violence? So how are we responding after something terrible happens? So all of that, right, is being driven by our Office of Neighborhood Safety, our police department, and even our Department of Safety and Inspections in terms of how we're thinking about how we respond to homelessness, our Parks and Recreation department. So it's really an all hands on deck sort of effort with a central office of neighborhood safety that's really helping to sort of connect the dots in terms of our policy and our investments.
Well, this is a perfect segue, Brother Noel, to talk about mental health, what your desire is, what your intention is through your Bush Fellowship to focus on the intersection between providing good public service, but also maintaining the mental health of the providers, the policymakers. And I think this came into particular focus broadly during the COVID crisis, because COVID made everything crystal clear, meaning first responders, people that were nurses and doctors and other things that had contact with people that were infected with COVID. And the consequence of that engagement was not only, included that many of the caregivers died. Many were sick, and many of their families, had to suffer the consequence. And so it made us, I believe, begin to look at how do we really reassess, reevaluate the critical importance and the need to assure and ensure the health and sense of confidence and well-being that those who are tasked with keeping us safe have to live through and with. And you're talking about that now as part of your project. Is that correct? Am I saying it the right way? There we go.
During the past few years is that we had two incredible traumatic crises. Well, even more than that, but two central ones.
Yes.
One, right, was the disruption to our lives because of the COVID-19 pandemic, right? And overnight, we were cut off from the spaces within the community where we connect with community. We became at-home schoolers, whether we wanted to or not. And, we were asked to just massively shift our lives in a space and a time. And it's hard to think about now, but at that point, everyone thought, it's just going to be a few weeks, right? We'll be back to normal.
Three weeks and symptoms are gone and I'm okay, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And then it became, is there an end to this? Right. So up until the point that there was a vaccine, it's like, is this our life now? Is this what's going to happen? And that's extremely traumatic. And then of course we had the mass trauma of the murder of George Floyd. Right. And so we were at the epicenter of that, right, which was a global mass trauma. Right. I was listening to a story recently where someone was sort of recounting that, and what we take for granted is because we were so close to it, there were people protesting around the globe because of that, because they were impacted by watching that murder take place, right, at the hands of folks in our community who are entrusted with a great amount of authority. And there's even research that says that there is acute mass trauma that takes place within the Black community every time that there's a police involved incident.
Mm-hmm.
Right, because it's like we see ourselves in that. I remember running into a reporter in front of the mayor, then the governor's mansion after Philando Castile was killed. Right, a Black reporter, and we looked at each other. We're like, "Oh my God! Like Philando could have been us."
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
we were experiencing that trauma, even though we were showing up just to do our jobs,
Mm-hmm.
right, to serve the community.
Mm-hmm.
And experiences like that, as a Black man working in public policy, really sort of brought to the fore for me that mental health is a critical component to thinking about what sustainable leadership looks
Mm-hmm.
like in our community.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So being Black or brown in our community, or a BIPOC individual, comes with a unique set of stressors. Being a leader within our community, whether you're a community organizer, right, or a social worker, or an elected official, or an advisor to an elected official, comes with a unique set of stressors, right? And all that is taking place within just an increasingly challenging dynamic where we're less civil, right?
Mm-hmm.
And where the stakes have felt like they haven't been as high in our lifetime. And so all of that causes mental distress for those of us who are doing the work. And I decided that for my own leadership and for thinking about what it looks like to get to that finish line, to get to that mountaintop that we all want to get to,
Mm-hmm.
I had to explore what mental health looks like as a part of the equation, as a part of the resources that we're pulling together to get there.
I think that's so important, and it's great that you've chosen a place to focus on a particular cohort, people in public service, and the impact of both assessing and attempting to support mental health for them as they advance policy and serve community. I want to throw one more thing out, though, because I think you're exactly on the right track. I think what you're doing is also allowing our community to use language we haven't used before. We've always talked about how there's a stigma attached to the question of mental health. We don't want to be regarded by ourselves or our friends or our family as unstable or mentally challenged or crazy, to be crass about it. And we've got this machismo is not the right word, but there's this historic piece with us, the African Americans, that says we can withstand, the hardship, whatever it is, because we've done this before. And so we accept the hardship as just the way it is. And we continue to let the light of what it could be grow smaller and smaller to where that is not part of our intention or our possibility, because we are so indoctrinated into the suffering, and that we end up creating new language that allows us to almost celebrate our suffering, our capacity to withstand the lash, to withstand the brutality, to withstand the exclusion, to withstand the marginalization, and to believe, as we are told, that's just the way it is. Be that as it may, I think what you're talking about and what you're doing, Brother Noel, is saying that's another set of images and ideas that must be shattered, that can be shattered, and that you are focusing on one arena in which that dismantling of what I call supremacist thought or policy that supports adversaries to our freedom, to our growth, to our humanity. So I think we're heading in the right direction. I would say that, what we have to do as well is figure out a way to change our whole attitude towards mental health and towards the capacity of healers, of mental health practitioners to engage in all elements and aspects of our lives. What if through your neighborhood safety program, you could hire 3,000, 5,000 therapists so that every block had a person who is a certified and trained mental health therapist who's assigned his radius or her radius to be available for people? How do we get to where we change the language in the community broadly so that we see healing as both our right and our obligation, that we begin to see ourselves broadly as both healed people and healers, that our interactions between each other reflect a knowledge of the power of healing in all that we do and all that we are for each other? What do you think?
One, I want to speak to what you talked about, Al, with sort of the notions of mental health within our community. And I think that within the Black community and within other communities of color, we have a strong belief that we can endure, right? We can endure the microaggressions and the macroaggressions and the systemic oppression, and get up every day and keep going until that day comes where we wake up and we feel like we can't do it anymore. Right. After telling ourselves that we can. And I believe that we absolutely, like, our history tells us that we have the strength to get to where we are today. Right. And, we've gone miles down the road and have miles to go. But I think the reframing is like, we are strong enough, but we don't have to be strong alone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what that means is being able to lean on our elders, our religious leaders, our friends, our family, and bringing into the mix our mental health practitioners,
Mm-hmm.
right, to help us as we work to build a world where maybe we don't have to feel the sense of oppression and hopelessness that we encounter, right, in things big and small in our everyday lives. And that distress is not unique to leaders, right? But what we do is we charge leaders with being the ones who are working at the forefront to build that world, right? And so again, whether you're a community organizer or an elected official or, anybody, right, who sees your work as change, you're carrying all the stresses that come with just being a human being,
Mm-hmm.
right? The stresses of being a parent, of being a partner, right? Of just being an individual, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a society. And you're carrying the stresses of fighting for change. And what I'm really interested in is this notion of radical healing.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you might ask me a question later about, what am I doing and how am I going about it, right? But Professor Brianna French, Dr. Brianna French at the University of St. Thomas is part of this network of psychologists nationally that's saying, like, how do we help folks get to a space of radical healing that exists between confronting and fighting oppression and maintaining our sense of hope, right? Because hope's got to be grounded in reality, right? And our sense of reality has to have a sense of hope, right? In order for us to move forward.
So you asked the question, so what do you do? What are the particulars for your work going forward right now?
So I am working on a master's in counseling psychology at the University of St. Thomas. And I'm really excited about that program because, like a couple other programs locally, it's designed for working adults, who have day jobs, have 9-to-5s. So I'm spending a lot of my nights and weekends learning about the fundamentals of counseling.
Mm-hmm.
And, my hope is to complete that course of study and possibly even pursue licensure as a mental health professional, and to put that knowledge right along my knowledge and expertise as someone who studied urban planning, someone who studied business, someone who's had the opportunity to work in government and in community, to continue to sort of fill my toolbox with different ideas and connections that we can make to build the change that we want to see within our community. Go ahead.
Well, so how does the Flint story that you lived through, that is a part of your narrative, influence what you do and what you hope for here in Minnesota and for our community, for our country?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, right? Because I get a chance to go back to Flint every few months or so, because I still have family back there. And the thing about Flint is it's continuing to go through some incredibly difficult times. So, the city is through the water crisis, but, there's still, massive amounts of blighted and abandoned houses, crumbling infrastructure, so just massive issues. That are really daunting. And there's a sense of hope and resiliency within that community. There are just like things small and large that are happening, whether it's a new farmers market or, our Aurora women's soccer team, professional soccer team, was just playing in Flint, Michigan, at the restored downtown football stadium. So there are these things that, even in the midst of a lack of resource that I think that we might not even be able to imagine here in the Twin Cities sometimes, there are some incredible things happening. And so, I think that as we look at the Twin Cities, I heard a leader once say that we have all the ingredients, we just need the right recipe. We have an incredible philanthropic community, an incredible corporate community, incredible local government leaders, state government leaders, county government leaders, a strong economy. So we have like all of these pieces, all these elements, incredible folks who have vision and knowledge and expertise. And how do we connect the dots? And how do we sustain folks through the midst of the difficult work of trying to connect those dots and trying to move things forward? I think if folks back home in my hometown of Flint, can maintain a sense of hope and vision, that something better can come. And that was something my mom believed in as a local court judge, until her dying day a few years ago. She would say, like, God has promised that he will bring forth water from the rock of Flint. And she believed in that community, and there's many others who do. How much more so, right, can we in the Twin Cities, believe that we can do incredible things and build a better community here?
We're down to the last 4 or 5 minutes here. Wanted to ask you, what was it? And a couple of questions that you had me think about, and I've lost them. They disappeared. But let me think. Oh, my producer helped me with my thoughts. Talk about your family, your background. What's your lineage?
I grew up an only child, but have a lot of aunts and uncles and cousins, who made up an incredible extended family, and moved here and fell in love, as many people who move here wind up doing. And my partner, Teresa, as we talk about folks who are incredible community healers, is an incredible organizer and healer in this community, who does a lot of work with the Cultural Wellness Center, as well as a lot of work around transportation access advocacy. And so we have beautiful nephews who fill our life with a lot of laughter and love. And I'm blessed as an only child to have some incredible sisters-in-law who fill my life with a lot of love too.
That's wonderful. What about the Rondo Land Bridge? I keep meant to bring it up to you
Yes.
early. What's the status on that, and what's the status on Rondo in general?
Yeah, so in my capacity, I represent the city of St. Paul on the board of the Reconnect Rondo Land Bridge Initiative,
Hmm.
and was really in some of the early conversations about, hey, maybe this is something that we can do. And so it is starting to move into some of the very early master planning phases with a lot of community conversation and community discourse about, what would we do, if we were able to restore a piece of the landscape of historic Rondo. What do we need from a housing standpoint, from a business standpoint, from an open space standpoint? So some of that that master planning work is starting to get underway. We've had incredible support from the federal government through the Reconnecting Communities grant, the state government, and then of course from the county and the city as well. And they're continuing to assemble the resources that are necessary to build a powerful, inspiring plan that'll help to lift up and carry forward the legacy of Rondo.
That's wonderful. Any other major projects underway that you're shepherding or monitoring in St. Paul?
Yeah, I think the big thing, it's an annual thing, so sometimes it doesn't feel like a big thing, but it's a big thing, is the city budget, right? And putting together the city budget for next year. So we just concluded, but our ears are still open. And we're still available to talk about what folks feel like Mayor Carter's priorities should be for the upcoming city budget for 2024. Final decisions will be made here in the coming weeks, and the mayor, under the charter, has to announce his and share with the public his proposed budget by mid-August. But it is not too late to reach out to us and let us know the things that you think we should be thinking about as we think about the investments that we'll make next year.
Listen, Brother Noel, I'm so proud of you, and I'm proud of Mayor Carter and the team of committed and brilliant, hardworking people that you all lead and assemble. Thank you for all that you do. You mentioned that there are several major conversations we need to have. And with that, we're taking note. I'm going to call on you to organize both yourself and maybe other team members, other stakeholders, to do deep dives in these areas that we need to talk about. So I want to thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here, and good luck. And again, congratulations on becoming a Bush Fellow.
Thank you so much.
All right, we'll see you next time. I'm Al McFarlane. Thank you for being here. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. Let me remind you one more time that our friends at the Health Department want you and all of us to get vaccinated. And there's an event coming up this Saturday in St. Paul, Saturday, July 15th, from 10 to 4 o'clock at the Amherst H. Wilder facility at 451 Lexington Parkway North in St. Paul. It's a community COVID-19 vaccine event, free vaccinations for ages 6 months and older. Also, you can get free COVID home test kits, and you can register or just walk in, show up. So again, let's pay attention, let's stay safe, and do the right thing. Well, I'm going to be out tomorrow and Friday, but my colleague, Dr. Irma, will be sitting in for me tomorrow, and Dr. B will be in Friday talking about healing and health in the Healing Circle on Friday. Then I'll see you again next Monday. In the meantime, have a great weekend. I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. We'll see you.